Parshat Naso is the longest and perhaps the most fragmented of the Parshiot in the Torah. And because of those two factors, Chazal try really hard to create some kind of connective thread between all of the different sections of the Parsha. The Parsha begins with the preservation of the standards of purity in the camp, and moves to talk about theft and financial obligation, and then goes to talk about Sota, the wayward wife who's accused of infidelity, and then goes to Nazir, the man or woman who takes a pledge to refrain from wine, cutting hair, coming into contact with the dead, and finally the Parsha concludes with the Birkat Kohanim, the priestly blessing. Among the connective threads that Chazal try to weave through these seemingly disconnected mitzvot is the Gemara in Brachot, which reads as follows. Rashi quotes this, and perhaps we're familiar with it. Lama nismacha parshat Nazir leparshat Sota. Why is it that Nazir follows Sota? Why are these two juxtaposed? Why did Hashem tell Moshe to write the Torah in this particular order? And of course, Smichad Parshiot, the sequence of Parshiot, is something that Rashi takes very seriously in terms of assuming the significance of that sequence. So what is the reason behind this specific sequence? The Gemara answers, Lomar lecha, the purpose is to tell you, to instruct you, to inform you, Shekol haro'es sota b'kil kula, that whoever personally witnesses a sota in her debased, in her quite degraded and devastated state, Yazir atzmo min hayayin, will come to separate himself like a Nazir separates him or herself from certain worldly engagement and certain worldly pleasures. The question that I have about this Chazal is whether it is descriptive or prescriptive, meaning, does the word Yazir, or the phrase Yazir et atzmo, is that describing the instinctual reaction that people have to witnessing something that is troubling, something that is tragic, like the case of the Sota? When we see something, maybe a car accident, chas v'shalom, or a horrible news story, the response is instinctually to try and modify our lives in a way that prevents us from being exposed to, being vulnerable to whatever the tragedy is that we've witnessed. So that's one way of understanding the Midrash, that it is descriptive of how human nature operates. We try to control whatever it is that we can control in order to protect ourselves and to ensure our own physical safety and well-being. Or perhaps it is a prescriptive, that Chazal are telling us that when we do witness something, when we are exposed to something difficult, something jarring, something destabilizing, that we ought to modify our lives in such a way that we are cultivating a sensitivity to stimuli in our environment, and not just a reaction that is psychologically strong, as in the case of the Nazir, who is refraining from wine and cutting hair, which are two things that might lead to a lessened, a weakened threat of promiscuity, because if one abstains from alcohol and one doesn't tend to their own physical appearance, there's less of a chance that one will be in a circumstance in which they are going to be compromised with infidelity, but also not just on a psychological level, but also on a spiritual level, that we should respond to the things that we experience in our lives, not just by making modifications psychologically to our lives, but also spiritually. The Nazir, seen in a positive spiritual light, is one who is spending more time introspecting, more time learning Torah, less time dealing with the material, physical world. Now, on a long-term basis, that's problematic, but on a short-term basis, that can be very productive and very generative, helping direct a person to focus on the most important things in life. And sometimes that is the appropriate response to seeing something that is devastating. And so I hope that we can take lesson from the Nazir's response to the Sota on a spiritual level and aspire to be spiritually sensitive people who respond to things in our lives by making choices that are spiritually growthful and spiritually meaningful for us and for our family and for our friends. I look forward to seeing you in Shul on Shabbat.